Today, we're diving into one of the most significant and, frankly, controversial deals in the European Union's recent history. It's a story that's now at the very heart of a major lawsuit, one filled with allegations of corruption, destroyed evidence, and secret back-channel negotiations at the absolute highest levels of power. 35 billion euros. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's the mind-boggling estimated value of the COVID-19 vaccine contract negotiated between the European Commission and the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer. We're talking about the largest deal of its kind in the EU's entire history. But the way this massive deal was put together has raised one heck of a question that investigators, journalists, and now the courts have been trying to get an answer to ever since it was signed. So get this. According to court filings and official reports, the core negotiations didn't happen in some big, formal boardroom with detailed notes and minutes. Nope, they allegedly happened over personal text messages. Now, for its part, the European Commission has argued that texts are, short-lived, ephemeral documents and that they aren't required to preserve them. But critics, and even the EU's own watchdog, completely disagree. And that's really the crux of this whole thing. Okay, so to really understand what this lawsuit is all about, we need to introduce the two main players at the center of this legal firestorm. On one side, you've got Frédéric Baldan. He's a former EU lobbyist who's turned whistleblower and is driving this case forward. And on the other side, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, who is the official he's accusing of some very serious misconduct. Baldan's lawsuit makes some pretty explosive claims. He alleges von der Leyen personally handled a deal for 4.6 billion vaccine doses. To put that in perspective, that's enough for 10 doses for every single man, woman, and child in the EU, a number he calls insane. He also claims she completely bypassed the official negotiating team, did the deal in secret, and then illegally destroyed the text messages, which he says are public documents. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Baldan argues this isn't just a one-time thing. He claims it's part of a pattern of behavior. He points straight to a scandal back in 2019 in Germany. Back when von der Leyen was the defense minister, she came under investigation for how some very lucrative consulting contracts were handed out. And what happened during that investigation? Well, data from 2 of her official phones was wiped clean. Baldan says, look, see the parallel? A controversial deal, an investigation, and then poof, the key data goes missing. So for Baldan, this isn't just some strange coincidence. In his own words, this whole sequence of events, a questionable deal followed by the very convenient destruction of evidence, is nothing short of a criminal modus operandi. He's saying this is a deliberate way of doing business outside the law. All right, let's talk about the investigation itself. Because according to Baldan, his attempts to actually get this complaint heard were met with one roadblock after another. Here's how he says it all went down. First, he files his complaint, and he's not alone. He has over 1,000 co-plaintiffs. Almost immediately after, the commission, which was led by the very person he's accusing, revokes his official lobbyist accreditation. Then, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, or EPO, takes over the case. But Baldan says the whole thing just stalls. He points to the chief prosecutor telling Parliament there's no suspect, even though Belgian police had apparently already confirmed that public documents were in fact destroyed. So, this is the crucial point for Baldan, the potential for huge conflicts of interest. Think about it. He claims the very organization that's supposed to be investigating von der Leyen is basically compromised. Why? Because its budget and its IT systems are controlled by her commission. He even alleges that as president, she has the power to force the chief prosecutor to resign. Now, Baldan's argument gets even bigger. He alleges this isn't just about one person or one deal. He sees it as part of a much larger, interconnected web of influence, a network he calls the global COVID cartel. He points to a handful of really powerful non-governmental organizations, foundations, and big corporations, like the ones you're seeing here. He claims they all work together behind the scenes to steer global public policy in a way that benefits them, essentially blurring the line between corporate power and state power. And he gives a specific example of what he sees as a major conflict of interest. He claims that if you look at archived versions of the World Economic Forum's website, it shows Ursula von der Leyen was still listed as a member of their board even after she became president of the Commission, a job that is supposed to be strictly independent. And this all leads to a mechanism he's given a name to: influence laundering. Here's how he says it works. The EU Commission allegedly uses taxpayer money to fund various lobby groups. Then, those same groups turn around and publicly advocate for the Commission's policies, but they do it under the guise of being independent voices of civil society. The result, according to Baldan's, is a totally fake sense of grassroots public support for the Commission's agenda. So, when you get right down to it, Baldan frames his entire legal fight as being about something way bigger than just some missing texts or a vaccine contract. For him, it's about a fundamental principle that affects every single one of us living in a democracy. He argues that when public officials can operate in secret and destroy records with zero consequences, fundamental rights, like your right to transparency, stop being rights at all. They just become privileges that the government can decide to give you or take away. So for Baldan, the stakes here are incredibly high. He sees this as a battle for the basic right to know what your government is doing. It's about holding the most powerful officials accountable. It's about stopping public power from serving private interests. In his view, the very future of democratic governance is what's on the line. And this whole saga leaves us with a really critical and, so far, unanswered question for the modern age. When our leaders conduct official public business on private devices, using text messages and encrypted apps, what happens to public accountability? And who really has the right to see the records?